What's up, fight fans, and welcome to the MMA Corner.com's UFC 174 Johnson versus Bagatinov post-fight show. I am Jason Shilkey, joined as always by the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla, Mr. Justin Fuller. Justin, how you doing, man? That says it
Strong.
all.
That's it.
All right, well, before we get started, tonight's event is show is brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with a knockout power. BattleBomb.com. And audio is brought to you by Soul Electronics. Soul, power, clarity, comfort. Get you some at soulelectronics.com. Well, Justin, this was a main card that, kind of looked good on paper, but, there's been a lot of stuff that looked good on paper, like the Hindenburg. So, what's your thoughts on the main card in general?
Man, there wasn't a whole lot to be like upset about really. Um, but as far as excitement, you know, we had one finish which was not controversial, but a little unconventional. The people that I thought would dominate their fights dominated their fights, And while that decision, the split decision with Arlovsky and Schwab, was controversial, I actually kind of think it's like a best case scenario because I like both those guys, and this way they both get to keep their job, and we get to see them fight again. So, I'll just kick it off with the first fight. I thought Jimmo was going to be able to take this. I did not think OSP's wrestling was going to be as good as it was. The guy has gotten a lot better. He's continuing to improve. And, I'm curious to see if he can keep improving at that level and take on some stiffer competition. So, he looked good in that. But I do want to see Jimmo fight again. I think there's some interesting matchups for him in the division. And, it might not mean he's on a main card of a pay-per-view again. But, again, like I said, I don't think he'll necessarily be cut with this, but you never know. He probably doesn't come with a hefty price tag, so that always plays into it. So I'm not really sure who Ovens should fight, but, he's definitely going to get someone higher up the ladder, and we'll maybe see where he goes.
Yeah, you're right there. Obviously, he did show how good his wrestling was against Jimmo, and he also showed how well his stand-up game was because Jimmo wasn't really able to touch him with anything significant in this fight.
Well, that's the thing is there was points where Jimmo was just like like he would have some moments of success, and then he would switch it up and try something different. And I'm like, okay, I get you like to switch it up from southpaw to orthodox to like throw your opponent off, but you're fighting a southpaw, so just stick to what's working and avoid that big left that he keeps coming at you with. And it was just seems like every time he'd find something that would work, he'd try something else instead of continuing on that. And he made some mistakes, I think, that cost him that fight as well. So I'm not saying, they fight again, he wins, but there was definitely just some execution faults or, things he could work on where he could have some better success. So Jimmo's problem has always been consistency in the UFC. So let's see if he can find his rhythm in the next fight.
And the fight was ended because Jimmo said he broke his arm, and after that leg injury, this is his first fight back after that year-long layoff after his leg injury, and so now he's looking at possibly some more significant time out of action with a possible broken arm.
Yeah,
So,
luckily, those are one of the more quicker to heal breaks, compared to say
yeah,
knee problems and back problems and orbital bones. So
very true. Now, in the second fight of the main card, we had returning former UFC heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovsky taking what most would call a controversial split decision over Brendan Big Brown Schaub. When did he become Big Brown? I don't know. But,
recently,
okay, that's what I thought. I wasn't impressed by either of these guys at all. I think Brendan, in all three rounds, he landed one good shot compared to Arlovsky's none. So, and neither of these guys, they just looked like they didn't come to fight. Arlovsky looked like he was scared the entire fight. He didn't want to engage all that much. Schaub kind of looked like he did against LeVar Johnson, where he's just trying to score points so he can win the fight, keep his job, as he put it when he was on the ground with LeVar. Um, yeah, neither of these guys. I mean, if either of them were making, trying to make a statement that they deserve to be, looked at as a potential contender in the heavyweight division, they both failed miserably. Justin.
I think this is a perfect example of when what you want to do and what you need to do are at odds, because Schwab didn't even really try to make a significant attempt to want to stand and trade with Arlovsky. It was just a lot of throw a lazy jab and then try and get in there and clinch. And it's like you kept trying to work that clinch, and you did not get him down to anything significant until the end of the third round. And those first two rounds were really close. And I wasn't really watching them to score them, but I can't say I am surprised by the decision. Not one bit. And, it's just one of those situations where you kept doing something that was not working, and you did not change what you were doing, and it did not work until towards the end of the fight. So at that point, change what you're doing to find something else that works. Or, every fight starts on the feet. There was no reason to think you were losing the feet, but you lost the feet because you were focusing on trying to clinch and get it to the ground. So I think that's really what hurt him the most. And like I said, I'm not really necessarily that disappointed with the outcome, because I get to see both these guys fight again in the UFC. And we'll see, now that Arlovsky's got that first one out of the way, what the UFC gives him after this.
Right, and I'm really interested to see where they decide to go with him too, because he didn't look good against Schaub, who's kind of in the lower tier of the heavyweight division, and so the fact that he was able to squeak away with a decision victory, maybe it was nerves getting back into the big shows. The last UFC fight he had was in 2008.
Yep.
If I remember correctly. Yeah, it's been almost 6 years since he's been in the UFC. So maybe it was jitters. Maybe we see the real pit bull next time out. Maybe Schaub paid a little bit too much respect to Arlovsky's punchy power. Maybe it's just and both those things combined is equal for a lackluster fight.
Well, it's funny because Schwab has landed some big shots early in that first round, and Arlovsky's chin held up to them pretty well. But then it's not like he ate some big ones and thought, crap, I should clinch and get to the ground. Maybe, he just started initiating some sort of, I don't know, maybe that was his game plan, just sort of, get him to back off so he's not confident in striking, then I'm going to try and work him to the ground. But then when you repeatedly do that and it doesn't work, you need to try something else, because this is a perfect example of you can lose the fight that way. There's no clear winner in those rounds. It's kind of about how do you want to score that round will determine who wins it. It's not like, well, what were you thinking? That was crazy, And I do think Schaub probably should have won that fight. But again, when you look at the way it played out, I can't really fault the judges 100% for that one.
Exactly, dude. It was a hard fight to score. I don't think anybody's going to be crying robbery one way or
another.
But
there was good judging the rest of the night too. So that that's the other part of it. It's not like there was just a bunch of robberies all night long.
Well, as you will find out, the rest of the card was pretty much straightforward. Like in the next bout, Ryan Bader and Rafael Feijão Cavalcante. I think on Thursday we both agreed that Bader needed to use his wrestling. And
he would use his wrestling, unanimous decision. He would dominate all 3 rounds. Called that one.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I thought so. I called the first 2 wrong. I think I said I picked Schwab, but I said I wasn't really sure. I think I leaned towards Schwab, but I thought it went into knockout, so I was wrong by the winner and the type there. But I'm not sad Arlovsky won. I thought Jimmo would win, but yeah, the next 3 played out exactly the way I thought they would.
Yeah, and what else is there really to say about Bader Cavalcante? Cavalcante, that he is a one-trick pony. He's going to try and knock you out. All 12 of his wins by stoppage, and he just went in there and he got this. It looked like he got discouraged because Bader was able to get the better of him in the first, and then you could just see his his energy level go and then plummet down.
Yeah, plus, when you got a guy on top of you like that and just imposing his will on you, it's like, it's not that, it's like, it sucks so much more energy out of you. It sucks like mental energy and physical energy and emotional energy. So it's like, you can be in the best shape of your life and you can have all the skill in the world, but when that happens, there's only those gas tanks drain a lot quicker, regardless of how much you prepare, how much you do.
Right. Well, but it is a good win for Bader. It's going to probably
Yes.
move him up into in the division a little bit. As far as Spejal goes,
Well, I
I
mean, yeah, number
he
9 beat number 11, so we'll see Bader move up to number 7 or 8 at least.
maybe probably, but we'll find out. So
I mean,
co-main
yeah,
event.
number 7 and 8 are coming off of losses. That's how I see it. I mean, yeah, they're the higher ranked guys, but when a guy's ranked number 9, he's got 2 wins, and 7 and 8 are coming off of losses. I say give him number 7 spot at least.
Well, unfortunately, neither of us are on the rankings panel. That would be
Yeah.
our own Rob Tatum. But the co-main event of the evening, Rory McDonald, Tyron Woodley. You know, St. Louis is a 3 mile shot down 44 West for me, and I swear on my life I heard Mama Woodley screaming at the top of her lungs at Tyron during that fight to do something. Because this was it was 3 rounds of Tyron Woodley with his back against the cage, Roy McDonald taking the center of the octagon, chasing him down, trying to land some punches, and doing so very successfully. I mean, he picked apart Woodley, except for a brief period in the beginning of that 3rd round. Woodley didn't come at McDonald with any sort of passion or any sort of, basically he showed that he didn't want to win the fight. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, Justin.
Rory did exactly what I thought he was going to do. He shut him down. I think it's not that Rory's this dominant fighter. It's not that he's this explosive fighter, and he's a technical fighter, but, not in that, like, Anderson Silva sense, when we talk about, like, that Bruce Lee style, right, of just, like, mastery. But he's a very technical fighter in that, like, he tries to execute his things with, like, the precision of a watch, and I think what he is he's a shut you down kind of fighter. He just uses that reach, he uses his strength, his conditioning to just impose a game plan on you and not necessarily destroy you, but shut down what you want to do and make it so you can't do what you want to do, and that'll break you down, and then he's just going to pick you apart over the course of the fight. So he still doesn't have that killer instinct that I'd like to see, and the problem with that is when you look at the other guys in the division, you look at Robbie Lawler, you look at Johnny Hendricks, you look at Matt Brown, you know what they all have in common? Some motherfucking killer instinct. They have that, and they all in their own way are really good at imposing their own will. They don't necessarily shut the other guy down, they just impose their own will.
Mm-hmm.
And finish you. That's what they do. But Rory, he shuts you down. So if he can shut down what you want to do, then he can win that fight and do damage throughout the fight. Just don't know if he can finish those guys, but we'll see. And this is, like I said, that's pretty much how. I mean, I wouldn't put money on it because Woodley, sometimes you don't know. He has those moments of greatness, but this is pretty much what I expected.
And you put it perfectly. Woodley does have his moments of greatness, and then he has his moments like this. This reminded me a lot of his fight against Nate Marquardt over in Strikeforce. Woodley just didn't take the fight. He just stood there, and it was like he was looking to land one big shot this whole fight, and that big shot never came around. So, with Rory McDonald, it's hard to deny that he is definitely next in line after the winner of Lawler and Brown. I don't think that with this performance that there's any chance whatsoever he's going to get bumped up in front of the winner of that fight unless they just completely stink out the joint. So, but we'll find out. And with Woodley, he's one of these nuts that are hard to crack, man. He has the talents to be good, and you want him to be good, but he just never he can never put together for any sort of significant amount of time to make a run to say, hey, I belong at the top of this division. He always has those moments like tonight where I don't know if it's cracking under the pressure or what the case is, but he just doesn't show up to fight. So that's
I don't know. I mean, where he goes, yeah, exactly. Where he goes from here, we'll see. It's still a pretty stacked division. There's a lot of fights in that division, and he's still a high. Even though Number 3 lost to number 2, so he's not going to drop too far down the rankings, especially considering the fact that he has a win over number 4. But maybe we'll finally get to see Matt Brown get a proper fucking ranking at this point. So, I mean, he's finally at number 5, which is where he should have been a year ago. So hopefully this gets him up there to number 3 or 4.
Which I don't doubt he will, but
yeah, especially because, let's be honest, people like, not people in general, but like sometimes the rankings will reflect where people think someone should be or where they're going, not necessarily what they've done. So now that he is booked in a title eliminator against number 1, he might actually get the proper ranking he's deserved based on what he's done because of what he could do in that fight. We've seen that time and time again.
Yeah, and of course rankings are all subjective and
that's like one of those things. Yeah.
Anyway.
Like people if I told you rank this guy, you go here. Then I go, well, now rank this guy knowing he's fighting that guy. You know, people go, oh, well, that changes everything because he could beat this guy. I'm gonna, it happens.
Yeah, that's a topic for another show that we have. But
yeah, like I said, I mean, there's options for Woodley in the division. He's still gonna have a good ranking, at least top 5. So there's a lot of guys that'll be looking to work their way up their ladder. You got Hector Lombard, Hyun Kim, and those 2 guys are really chomping at the bit, And
yes.
in their own way, they probably feel like they should be in front of Matt Brown, by some law. And some people would agree with that logic. I'm not one of them, but I could see how they would come to that conclusion. So those guys might be looking to take on Woodley, assuming he's not hurt, assuming he's healthy and he's ready to get back into it. You got guys like that, and you got guys like Jake Ellenberg, who, just like Woodley, coming off a bad loss. So let's see what they can do, right?
Hey, I wouldn't scoff at any of those fights. Yeah. So
winner gets paid, loser walks. So
well, an old-fashioned WWE loser leaves town match.
Loser leaves town match.
I just got that just because you got the Hulk Hogan mustache going on right now.
That's right, brother.
So in the main event of the evening, Demetrius Johnson, Ali Bagatinov. Demetrius just proved why he is if not, I'm going to say he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world in mixed martial arts.
Now some would say that you're just buying into the UFC hyperbole because this week he's the pound-for-pound guy. The next pay-per-view, Chris Weidman's the pound-for-pound guy. But you know what? I've been saying that for a while. Like, Johnson does not get the credit he deserves.
Not at all. I mean, watching him fight is like watching poetry in motion, and he just goes. He's one of the guys, rare people in the sport that can go 25 minutes and keep the same pace in the 5th round that he had when he came out in the 1st round. And everybody thought that Bagatinov was going to be a big challenge. Vegas in it, but a lot of pundits believed that. And Johnson, he just dominated him. He shut him down. No other way to put it. I mean, those knees that Bagatinov was taking in that tie clinch were brutal. I mean, his rib cage was all red, his face was busted up, and Johnson came out of the fight looking clean as a whistle. I mean, there's no more denying that Johnson is not the pound-for-pound king. I mean, some can make an argument below John Jones because technically John Jones hasn't lost. His one loss being against Matt Hamill that DQ for the 6-12 or 12-6 elbows, whatever. But he has to be up there. If you don't have him in number 2, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you. You can't deny this guy anymore. We've been screaming it forever about how good Mighty Mouse is, and it's just a shame that these smaller guys don't get the prop.
He's at number 4. Cain Velasquez is at number 3. I'm like, how do you have Cain? My problem was like when you get a champion and then a champion loses, it's like, when JDS won the belt, he was up there, and then Cain disappeared. I'm like, so that belt determines you get number 3, and the other guy just disappears? Is that how we're doing things? And Cain hasn't fought since when, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, Jose Aldo's always going to be up there. John Jones is always going to be up there until proven otherwise. But Demetrius has definitely proven that he should be up there too. And, like I said, what more do you need from the guy? Five-time defending champ, right?
The only champion at 125 the UFC's ever known.
Yeah, exactly. So or he's defended it 4 times since winning it. So I mean, there's just What more do you want from the guy? You know, he's finished two of those guys, and he's just dominated the other two. Does he have to beat them all again? Is that it? He has to beat number 1 through 4 a second or third time, and then
No,
he's there.
what he needs to do is jump up to 145 and take on Aldo. Then maybe he'll get some of the
Yeah,
respect he
right.
deserves.
Well, with him is, I would say, the only thing that's hurting him is that the division is still maturing. You know,
Right.
and one thing I said about him before is, he's not a guy they brought in, or a guy who was kind of middle of the pack and dropped weight. Like, this is a guy whose last loss was to Dominic Cruz for the UFC Bantamweight Championship in a 5-round decision back in 2011. He had a 4-fight win streak before that in the WC and UFC. And his only loss before that, his only other loss, was to Brad Pickett at WC 48, which was over 4 years ago. So
Right.
the guy was already a number one contender.
He's been a number one
With it,
contender for
the guy was
years.
already a number one contender in the UFC when they created this weight class. So he was already operated at 90%. Like, he'd already had 15 fights and so many years of experience and training and top level opposition in the WC and UFC to get to that point. That's just something these other guys didn't necessarily have. So they weren't at their max capacity, essentially. So we see him improve a little bit each fight, but he's close to his peak. And the thing is, like, he started out that way. So when he does fight, say, Dodson again, or if Bogatinov gets back up there again, these guys will be completely different fighters. Because when you look at where they were at in their careers when they fought him as opposed to where he's at in his career, he's at that point in his career more comparable to the other champions. His opposition is not necessarily, and that'll just take time for the division to mature.
Now, in the midst of all this, let's not forget about Bogatinov. I mean, even though he lost cleanly lost all 5 rounds, it's very evident that this guy is just tough as hell because
Yes!
anybody else in this division
Yes!
gets dropped unconscious by some of those shots that Mighty Mouse was nailing him with over and over again. But he just stood there, he ate them, he took them. I mean, just the body work alone would have crumbled the rest of anybody else, anybody in the division would have crumbled just to the body work. But Bagatinov proved that he is just tough as hell, and you have to give him some credit for that because there's points where you could just see after the rounds that he was just completely demoralized, especially after I think it was about the 3rd round. That look on his face was like, what the hell am I doing here? But it never stopped him from going out there, trying his best to try to make something happen against the fastest fighter in mixed martial arts. I mean, you can't
No,
catch him.
absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
impossible.
Nothing but respect and props for Ali. The guy has a granite chin and a will to fight. And we really didn't see him slow down until the 4th round. Like, he was losing the first 3 rounds, but he was still keeping up with the pace. And by the 4th round, and again, I don't think it was a cardio thing. I think it was just you were getting beat up for 3 rounds. That's going to take some wind out of your sails situation, especially since the guy trains in Albuquerque. One thing I do want to point out is, everyone talks about Greg Jackson, and let's look at Matt Hume for a second.
Absolutely.
Okay? And not only that, but like, there's a big difference between saying Ali Bogatnov trains with Greg Jackson and saying John Jones trains with Greg Jackson. Okay, Greg Jackson's one man. Okay, and when 50 fighters, or when they talk about 50 different fighters saying that they train with him and spend time at that camp, how much one-on-one time do you think they're all really getting? The guy getting the most one-on-one time is going to be your champion, who doesn't even live there, by the way. Okay, most of the guys that train there do not live there. All right, and he's more of the tactician, right? These guys are going to work with jiu-jitsu guys and striking coaches and wrestling coaches for the technique and the drills, and he's the guy that's going to kind of come in and just go through some scenarios and come up with game plans and just try and break it all down for you and help and. If that's what guys want, great. I mean, maybe it's just the benefit you go there and there's all these other great guys, and there's this this energy, and you all feed off each other, and you're training with great guys. But Matt Hume is like, when you just hear him coaching DJ, it's like very specific. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
great, now throw the knee on the outside. Great. All right, hey, move your hand. Like, it's very specific technical coaching. It's not conceptual coaching. It's very one-on-one. And that relationship's going to be a lot more intimate. Like, this is your one top-level fighter who has a belt. Like, and he lives there. He trains with you year-round. And this is a guy who's, competed and been training top-level guys for over a decade now. So you have to, like, let's acknowledge Matt Hume, and he's kind of in that same boat as Dwayne Bang. Like, these guys who know how to fight and, know how to, get really into the technical details of the fighting for their guys and get that relationship going.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have Bang, of course, he just coming off. I mean, he's got all that fame, especially with Dillashaw being the first person to beat him Barao in the UFC. Of course, his stock's up there, and with all these glitz and glamour coaches out there like Greg Jackson, then you have the like Zillions, and you have the guy the guy that runs TriStar. I can't pronounce his name to save my life. But then it seems like Matt Hume gets lost in the shuffle. I don't think there's many people out there that respect and know what he has done in his career about his fights in Pancrase and under Pancration rules, and the fact that he takes the time. He doesn't spread himself so thin that he can't give his fighters the attention they deserve. Whereas with he has his almost entire time devoted to Demetrius Johnson to help him improve his game, and I think that's played a huge role in the development of Mighty Mouse as a fighter. Because you just see him since his WEC days. Compare him to where he was in that loss against Brad Pickett to the fighter he is now.
Yep.
There's zero comparison. No. I mean, he is night and day, by far, much better fighter. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Matt Hume, his guy is Mighty Mouse.
Yeah. And to be fair, Joseph Benavidez was in a similar situation. Like, fought for the title, had a number of fights in UFC and WEC before the weight class. You know what I mean? Had a great camp, was already operating there at that 90% number one contender status going into the weight class. But when you look at Moraga, the guy had 2 fights in the UFC, no WEC fights, right, before getting a title shot. John Dodson, 3 official UFC fights. 1 was winning the Ultimate Fighter before fighting, Demetrius Johnson. No WEC fights. And so it's just sort of like that. And it's not to say they don't have the talent or the skill, but you spend that much time competing at that level, there is these compound benefits. Like when you're the guy who's fighting for titles in the UFC, you are going to get paid better. You are going to get better sponsors. You're going to get more people coming in to be your training partners. You're going to get coaches willing and able to spend more time with you. There's just this whole support network around you almost that is just going to make you better progressively. So when you're already at that level and you fought at that level before, it's just hard for guys to compete with that, and it takes some time for them to pull it all together. So I think there's people that have the potential to take down the king. Let's just hope that they can develop to that point,
Exactly. I mean, because you bring up a really good point that 125 is so new. And while Mighty Mouse is the king at the top of the mountain, I wouldn't mind. I mean, I don't think anybody, like we said on Thursday, I think the only person in the division that can beat him is John Dodson. He's the only person I think has a shot.
Yeah.
But I would not complain at all if there was some parity in these divisions, like the women's 135-pound division, the flyweight division, now the upcoming strawweight division. I think it's not necessarily good to have one king at the top of the mountain because it creates no parity within the division. It doesn't give these guys the extra time to shine in the division.
I don't know, man. We'll see. I think. I don't think you can really say one way's better than the other. I think just as long as we're getting fair competition, like we don't want to see him not fight. But at the same time, we want to make sure these guys have enough time to develop, and we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, interesting enough, TJ Dillashaw said, like, he doesn't really cut a lot of weight, and he has a hard time, like, maintaining weight when he's in camp, so that way he does not feel small. So the fact that like he's saying that like means that we could potentially see him drop back down, which
Or
would be really or drop down to that flyweight. Like that would be really interesting, especially considering that he lost to John Dodson, not too long ago. But again, like the T.J. Dillashaw that lost to John Dodson is not the T.J. Dillashaw that just beat Henan Barrow.
no
And
kidding.
but I just think it's like and again, not to take anything away from Greg Jackson, because I mean, guys are going to do what they feel is best for them. But
Hmm.
this idea people have that like he's one man who there's only 24 hours in a day, and only a small amount of fighters actually live in that town. So when there's 50 different people on the roster that train with Greg Jackson, like you got to think of, okay, but where are you training the rest of the year? And who else are you training with in that camp? And how much time is that school dedicating to your fight? Because are you John Jones? Are you Tim Kennedy? Or, and that's the other thing too, like Dodson's out of Albuquerque. And here's, Ali fighting for the title. So you sort of get that, like, well, what would happen if he won? Does Dodson have to leave? Right? You get these big camps, and you're more likely to run into that. And, like, even though TJ's fighting in a camp with guys in the same weight class, they're all still backing him. Like, you're the guy fighting for the title, so you're the guy we put our effort into. Chad Mendes is fighting for that. This is the guy we're going to put our effort into, regardless of who else may be fighting for that belt. But that's just because they all have a different relationship with each other, and the fighter has, Uriah has his own, he owns his own gym, too, so he doesn't have to worry about that.
Right. So, but anyway, the main card as a whole. Started off good. I think it ended really
Yeah.
good. There was kind of a lull there in the middle for about 9 rounds that were pretty much two fights for one side. The other one was kind of up in the air. Referring to Schaub and Arlovsky. But I mean, to me, the main event made it worth it. I really appreciate the
It
type of fight
saved
that
the
they put
card.
on. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it was a tremendous fight, despite the woman yelling wildly in the background the entire fight. Don't know what the hell's going on there, but I mean, the main event, awesome. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Jimmo and OSP was a great, great fight until it ended. The middle is kind of iffy. What are your final thoughts, Fuller?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a controversial ending. It was just a weird ending,
Yeah.
But at least I thought, well, at least we're starting the card off good. I mean, if this were something that I didn't, I mean, if this were something that I had personally spent $60 on and not just gone to a bar and spent $10 there, like I would probably be a little upset, honestly. And partly it's because I was so amped for this card, but that's not the UFC's fault. That's not my fault. That's just kind of how things play out. I will say this though, man, it is rough being on the East Coast and staying up till 1 o'clock to watch fights, and then I'm jealous of the people on the West Coast that kind of get to wrap things up, at at 10:30, 11 o'clock. Like, I am jealous of that because the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, okay, these are big name fighters. I was stoked about the talent on this card. I'm thinking, man, I'd rather be watching a Fight Pass card in the afternoon. I really would, just because I get to kick back, sit on my couch. I don't have to worry about staying up late. I don't have to worry about whether or not I have to regret spending money, and because I'm never going to regret spending $10 a month for Fight Pass.
Right.
But that's just how the fight game works, and but I am glad I got to catch that main event. It did save the card, and detractors be damned, man. Like, I'm not just saying DJ because he's the guy fighting this week. I mean, I'll say DJ over Chris Weidman, even if Weidman knocks out Machida, which I don't think is going to happen anyway. So
Yep.
we'll see how it goes.
So, but looks like next week we have a week off, and then on the weekend of the 28th we have two fights again on the same night, or two events on the same day. When we have Marquardt Tehuna going down New Zealand at 5 a.m. Eastern time. Sure, we're going to be up for that one. And then
Hmm.
later that evening have another fight night card: Cub Swanson versus Jeremy Stevens. And then a week after that we have Weidman Machida, and then the day after that we get Edgar versus BJ Penn. So once again, tonight's episode brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with power. BattleBomb.com, and audio brought to you by Soul Electronics. Soul, power, clarity, comfort. Check them out, soulelectronics.com. So for Justin Fuller, I am Jason Schilke. Until 2 weeks from now, keep on living the MMA Corner lifestyle.